The Gull Bay First Nation is located in Northwestern Ontario on the western shoreline of Lake Nipigon, 2 hours north of Thunder Bay. The remote, non-grid connected community has been dependent on diesel fuel since the 1960s, when diesel gensets were brought in for power generation. Today, however, the community is home to Canada's first fully integrated remote renewable energy storage microgrid, which significantly curtails the community's reliance on diesel. Joining us to speak about this landmark project are Kevin Ritzmann and Tony Murphy of Alltrade Industrial Contractors, which served as the engineer, procure, construct contractor for this unique project. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Anthony.
Now, back in early 2018, Electrical Business Magazine reported that Gull Bay First Nation and Ontario Power Generation would co-develop a microgrid that will use solar, battery storage, and grid technology to help reduce the community's dependence on diesel by some 110,000 liters per year. And then about a year and a half later, the project was complete. So Kevin, let's start with you. How did Alltrade Industrial get involved in the first place in this unique project? And I might as well ask this now, but I'll ask it again later if you don't answer me. As the EPC contractor, what did the scope involve?
Sure. Yeah, good question, Anthony. So Alltrade has had an existing relationship with Ontario Power Generation since we started doing work for them in 2015 on the hydroelectric side. So, another type of renewable power generation. OPG pre-qualified 4 contractors to look at this project. And based on Alltrade's renewable expertise in Ontario and across Canada, and also our passion for the industry was a big part about why we were selected. We put forward a good proposal and a good team, but there's actually an interesting story to how we won the bid. So the OPG was tendering this work, and they put out the notification that there was going to be a site visit in about 2 weeks. So it was on I think a Thursday or a Friday, 2 weeks from when I got the notification that there was going to be a site visit up to the community to look at the project. So right away I booked the flight, and when I showed up, I actually was the only contractor that showed up for the job walk. So I think the community recognized that, we were very interested in the project compared to others. And we had good discussions there. We walked the site, and so we got a good feeling, obviously, for the project. So that's how we were awarded the work initially. And then your second point there, so our scope on the project. So as the EPC contractor, Ontario Power Generation had procured the battery energy storage system and the microgrid controller. So aside from that material, we were responsible for all of the detailed design, overall site testing, so detailed design on electrical, civil, structural, and then procurement of all the major equipment, all the remainder of the major equipment and balance of system materials, and of course then the construction of the project as the general contractor.
That's quite the tall list, but I I did want to highlight, I guess, for anyone watching this, that Alltrade's secret recipe to winning bids is show up.
That's right. Yeah, show up when they ask you to the site walk.
I want to move on to Tony for a moment here, because Kevin, you had mentioned booking a flight and going to do a site visit. Tony, Gull Bay First Nation, it's not just down the street. Can you tell me a little bit about just where this is located, the remoteness of this location?
It's approximately 185 kilometers north of Highway 17. The highway's not a good highway. It's virtually a trucking road type of thing like that there. It is getting better, obviously. They are, working on the roadway up to that area. It's a small community. There is virtually nothing near it. There's a town about 65 kilometers north called Armstrong, and that has some accommodations, has a store, restaurants, etc. There is approximately 300 members live in the community. It is a reserve of approximately 1,100 members that do not live in the community. They're scattered around from North Bay to, Thunder Bay to right out to Winnipeg, etc. There's a lot of people that are traveling in, and they're all members and descendants of the people that live there. It's been a community for about 172 years. The first treaty that was signed was in 1850, and it was the Robinson Superior Treaty of 1850. So there's, like I say, there's nothing there, and all the roads are dirt. It's as remote as you can get virtually.
Good heavens, Tony, you really know your history, my friend.
It's been an interesting project, and like I said, I did some reading up on it when I went up there, and learned some of the history of the people and the area and what's happened with it. Like, there is a bit of a disagreement on the size of the reserve, and it's been established 170 some years ago, but it was established the wrong size. So there is a survey that was done, and they've appealed the survey, and it's still ongoing today. When they first realized there was a problem, there was 3 reserves that had problems, and they sent people out to 2 of them in Quebec, and the 3rd one was Gull Bay, and they stated the fact that it was too far and too remote, and we would come back later on to see you. And they did, 47 years later.
Oh, man.
By then, all of the elders were dead, and nobody knew what was going on. So this is why it's being disputed as we speak now. It's still ongoing.
Interesting. But I think on a topic that I hope there is no dispute is the actual site and the works that you guys put in developing this microgrid. That's all good. That's all okay.
That's all good. It's within the area that was surveyed originally. So
okay, very good, very good. Okay,
Yeah.
so that part is all right.
Actually, Anthony, it's an interesting story. We've spoken about this project a few times. It's been operational since 2019, but it really, the whole idea of why Gull Bay was chosen was a story of reconciliation with OPG, and from the early hydroelectric construction that was done and how it impacted the community. But that's a big reason why Ontario Power Generation was involved, and also why the site was selected, because they're a community that will never be connected at this time to the provincial distribution line. So they are 100% on diesel generators.
No, and good for OPG because I've published news of OPG. I believe they're part of, if not a leading proponent of Canadian Council for Aboriginal Businesses Progressive Aboriginal Relations Program. So good for them for making these things happen. Getting back to the location, and Alltrade has won the bid, secured the work. I'm curious now, because the location is so remote, has not great roads going into it. How did you coordinate your manpower, and how did you coordinate the materials that you needed to get there? Where did people sleep?
we slept in Armstrong, and we slept in a small little camp called Cab Lake. And it was a small community there. It was like maybe 10 buildings with like they're virtually lodges for a hunting camp type thing like that. And there was a trailer park there for people with trailers. So it's like a summer community. So we stayed in that until the weather got a little bit cold and the water line started to freeze. Then we moved up into Armstrong, and we stayed in Armstrong in the motels that were available there. And there's not a lot available.
Now, what about working with your suppliers? Did you were you able to get any deliveries on site, or did you have to make sure that you bundled up everything in the exact quantities you needed and truck them up there yourself?
There was a delivery service through a company called Gardwine that would come up there mainly on a Wednesday, once a week, and they would be making deliveries. So the truck driver would come up, hit all the points on the way up there, and obviously we would have our supplies on his truck. It was the same guy every week, you know. I mean, he wasn't in a hurry. He'd sit there and talk to you for an hour. Nice guy, but it was, you know, and he knew all the locals and that type of stuff like that. So it was nice to have it. And like anything small, it was a 5 or 6 hour drive, 2.5 down and 2.5 back up, and you'd have to get it.
So you really want to make sure you don't forget anything. Um,
Yeah.
Now, okay, so Alltrade has won the bid, and you figured out your manpower, where people are going to sleep. You figured out your materials. Um, After that initial site visit, when you actually get down to the constructability of this thing, how did the site match up at the time, construction was able to commence, with what you thought was going to happen, with what you had planned for and what you had down on paper? What sort of challenges, obstacles, if any, did you face once construction started?
Yeah, no problem. So, part of this project, we were given a zone of land, and we had to, because it's an EPC project, we developed the entire design with very limited information. So we ended up getting approval to clear the land, and we used a local contractor for that work, which was turned out great because they knew the conditions well. And after we did that clearing, the initial clearing, we went in and did pile testing, so foundation testing. One of the key points we wanted to hit hard on this project was limiting the use of concrete in our design. And actually, we were able to not have any concrete on the project whatsoever. So we wanted to utilize helical pile foundations, and where we had initially planned the project was as close to the diesel generators as possible for the interconnection to Hydro One remotes. But when we actually got on site and did that initial geotechnical testing, we found out there were some soft soils there. So we actually had to move the site back, which extended our costs on our interconnection conductors on our feeders. But I think that was the largest unknown that we experienced. So we had a good design team, and we were able to work around the lack of concrete because of how remote the site is. As Tony said, you're 2.5 hours from Thunder Bay, which is where the concrete would come out of, and it's costly.
So it wasn't necessarily because of that soft soil you mentioned that you wanted to avoid concrete. It was at least initially a case of concrete is really far away. Let's go with something else.
That's right. Yeah, prefab as much as possible, and we did that on the E-house. Some of the equipment that was selected for a couple reasons: climate control, very low temperatures in that region. But we tried to prefabricate as much as possible. In our case, in Southern Ontario, and near our head office and from our vendors, and ship that up to site, including tools and equipment. So we would have, Tony and his site team go through the drawings, make sure we've got all our material before we send those sea containers up with all the tools and material.
Now, Kevin, you mentioned climate control for the E-house. It got me thinking about the climate of the area where Gull Bay is located. Now, we featured Gull Bay in the Microgrid project. It was the cover feature of our December issue, and on the cover, you see someone in the snow and the cold working on connecting solar panels. Now, Tony, were you there during the ugliest of winter weather?
You betcha. There was days that forklifts wouldn't start, trucks wouldn't start. Have to plug everything in, and even with it plugged in, it didn't help some days. one day it was minus 45 on the thermostat, and I was great. My truck started. Then it froze up. That it did start. We had like in the hotel, there was 7 trucks parked there, all plugged in. None of them started.
Oh, wow. So even plugged in, you're you're still not up and running. So what happens on a day like that? Do you just stay in and play cards, or?
Just about. Yep. It was one of those cold days. I decided to drive to town, which is Armstrong, which we were staying with like 2 kilometers out of Armstrong, and the truck froze up driving, just stopped in the middle of the road. Yeah.
So, so for anyone watching this, they can see there are a whole lot of challenges with a project like this, even before you start installing anything or interconnecting anything. There's the soil conditions, the distance from your shop, from suppliers, and then if you are graced enough to be there during the winter, then you have vehicles that don't start.
On top of it, Anthony, we didn't mention it, but communications is also a problem. So cell service is non-existent there. Thankfully, we were able to put in satellite internet at our office trailer, and it was better than the high-speed internet in the community. So we had community members getting the password and watching YouTube at night, I think, off of our internet because it was better. But just another challenge to be aware of.
But that means you're a good corporate neighbor by by letting them use your internet. And actually, that segues nicely, Kevin, into my next question. And you had also mentioned OPG and reconciliation actions, based on earlier water power projects. So in our collective pursuit of progressive Indigenous relations, Kevin, how did Alltrade collaborate or communicate with the community, the members of Gull Bay?
Yeah, good question. So initially, this project was very important to the community. So even from day one in the RFP requirements, when we started looking at this project, there was a requirement for a community benefit plan. So we, our pre-construction team, when we're looking at a project, we do our best with the information we have to put together a plan as to how we're going to involve the community. But on the front end, we weren't able to speak with them, actually. So we put together our thoughts, and when we were awarded the project, we were able to, Gull Bay First Nations, their team, their chief and council, and their energy coordinator reviewed the community plan that we put together, and were able to provide input, and it was approved prior to starting construction. So that was kind of the first step. But then what we were doing, we held a bunch of sessions in the community prior to construction starting, where the locals could come out, ask questions to our project management team on how they could be involved in the construction. We also ended up utilizing their local gravel pit supplier for aggregate supply. So incorporating that and incorporating some of their subcontractors. So like the clearing and grubbing. And overall, it was really a highlight of the project, because looking back, we were able to utilize 25% of the labor on the project was from the Gull Bay First Nations community, either directly or through a subcontractor.
You mentioned 25% of the labor and some of the local suppliers, local subcontractors. Do you think you've inspired anyone to pursue the path of electrician, electrical contractor after having been there?
Tony, why don't you go ahead? Yes, I think that the one man that we had working with us, his name was Darren, but he was, I'm going to say he was probably close to 45 or something like that there. He was quite interested in it, and we did sign him into the union hall as what's classified as a white card. So he would get benefits from that there. Now, I'm not sure if he's continued on with that. I know they were going to try to help him keep him on moving with his apprenticeship type thing like that there. So he did get signed on as a white card to do that. He was very capable, man. Like, I mean, he could operate any of the equipment we had and stuff like that. So he was very, very handy and very well liked on the site. So it was good to see.
Oh, it's great to hear. Well, here's hoping Darren takes it as far as he can take it. Now I'd like to, now that we've covered, discussions of, the community and developing a plan, and we've covered the remoteness and trying to sort out materials and manpower. Now I'd like to get into sort of the nuts and bolts, the really geeky, nerdy stuff of the microgrid project. And Kevin, I'll start with you. Maybe just sort of highlight some of the components, the systems that make up this microgrid.
We have a battery energy storage system on this project, which utilizes Samsung battery modules, which was supplied by OPG through ABB. So ABB also supplied their microgrid controller, and I'll come back to that because that's really what makes the whole project work. The power generation side of it is the solar array. So we installed a fixed tilt solar array, and we used Canadian solar modules at the time, and they were 365 watt modules. And we're quite involved in ground mount utility scale solar here. And so to give you an idea of the technology advancement, so this year we'll be installing 540 watt panels. And this project went online in 2019 at 365 watts. So, which was the cutting edge technology at the time. So those were the panels we used. We used a polar racking, fixed tilt rack on the project with helical pile foundations, as we mentioned. But then on the inverter side, we utilized Fronius string inverters, which we put right into our e-house, or electrical house, temperature controlled e-house, where we also housed all the SCADA and communications equipment. So that kind of makes up the bulk of the system. That microgrid controller, though, I think was probably the largest challenge on the project from a design aspect, and just having these systems communicate with each other, including the diesel power generation, which is the bulk of the generation in the community. So making sure the timing of these systems all lines up. There were some good lessons learned there from the team.
Well, and I'm glad you bring up the diesel generator, because the microgrid has not displaced and outright removed the diesel generator. It's just offsetting so that the community doesn't have to rely 100% and saves on diesel. So yeah, in looking at the controller, the brains of the system, and trying to balance out, okay, what's coming from the solar panels? We've got this diesel genset here. When does it come on? When does it turn off? How does a typical day work in Gull Bay?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So a typical day, when when Gull Bay gets enough irradiance, the diesel generators will kick off. So that's somewhere around noon. Is what we've been seeing here. And then the solar will charge the battery. And then when we lose irradiance out there, the battery will continue to power the community load at that time, and up until sometimes 8-10 p.m. at night in the evening. So really, when we have those good sunny days, that solar irradiance is charging that battery, and then when that sun goes down, utilizing that battery for the generation for the community.
Nice. And now we got some of the technical stuff from Kevin. Tony, what was it like installing all of this good stuff?
It was a bit of a challenge. First off, we started putting in, once we had all the piles put in and tested and all that type of stuff, we did have to put in frost sleeves on all the piles because they were afraid they were going to start pulling out of the ground with the frost. So we just put a frost piece of pipe down over top of the pipe already in the ground. And then we could start our racking. So it was just kind of protective the pile from moving with the frost. The helical piles are 6 meters long, so there's 4 meters in the ground. And they were afraid that that's what's going to start heaving and lifting with the frost. So we installed a frost sleeve. That was a part of, after we did some testing on the poles, of how much we needed and which areas were good and which areas were bad. And it just seemed to be the best case scenario was frost sleeves on them all. And then once we got all the frost sleeves on them, we could start installing the racking. The racking, it's not a very big area, obviously, it's 1,000 panels type of thing like that in area, but it still has its challenge, and you're working with a group of people that haven't done that type of work before. And we ended up hiring a couple of guys to come up and give us a hand with that. And that was the game fixer for that, because once we got the racking in, it was straight, it looked good, we could start installing panels. And the guys that helped us with the install were a couple of great guys. They knew exactly what they were doing, which was good to see. And they helped us out immensely. And like I say, the racking is the same racking in virtually everywhere, but up there, and the challenges of having to install it with people that aren't aware of how it goes together was a bit of a challenge, so it was different.
Now, by all accounts, the project is a success. I was going through OPG's website earlier today and found some of their follow-up reports, news items on Gull Bay. And here I have a quote from Gull Bay's Chief Wilfred King. Now, this is just several weeks after the microgrid went online. He noted that in the last few weeks, as we went into full operations, we have already reduced over 12,000 liters of diesel with clean, renewable solar power. So by all accounts, a success. So Tony, before I turn to Kevin to close us out, your final thoughts on the project, your experience.
I think it was a really good experience for me. It was like a unique project, and the people up there were great. They'd have some dinner and we'd be invited to the dinner, and we get to, eat moose stew and bannock and stuff like that, which was great. The guys all really enjoyed it. The thing that I think is really unique is the fact that in about 60 years, they've never had the generator off. It's always been running. So now, once the power is up and on, it's on running off the solar panel, it's quiet in the area.
What an excellent point you bring up, to suddenly be able to, at some points during the day, just not hear the drone of that genset. I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Actually, during the opening ceremony was the first time that the generators had been off in 60 years. So I was able to be there with our project management team and our design firm, and it was quite the experience, Tony, for sure. So definitely something special to witness and be a part of after that long of that noise.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great to hear. So, Kevin, I will have you close us out because you had mentioned before this isn't the first time you've talked about the Gull Bay project, and so you've mentioned before that there were some critical success factors that you point to that you believe help make the project successful. Can you talk about some of those critical success factors?
Sure, yeah. I think what another thing that makes this project unique was the Gull Bay First Nation's leadership. From day one, they were very involved. AJ Escuela, who was the Gull Bay First Nation's energy coordinator on the project, was very passionate about the job and always made sure he lives in the community, and he would work with Tony and our team and the owner's team, Ontario Power Generation, on the project. And so there was always very good open communication, which is key to these things. we were, I think being respectful of everybody's expertise in certain areas and working together. Collaboration was key on this, especially with even some of the vendors. It was a challenge because it was a first in Canada, mating some of these technologies together. So that presented its own challenges, but everybody saw the outcome and had the goal in mind of what we wanted to see. So that was critical. But I also have to mention safety. So on our projects, our motto is build it safe, no exceptions. As Tony mentioned, we're working with some people who are not on a construction site every day. We do have very high safety standards. So our subcontractors, we had to ensure that they knew the requirements up front and the expectations. And we wanted to make sure that, everybody could go home in the community every day safely and learn something off of the project. So that was good.
And so they can go home and perhaps read in peace and quiet because the diesel is off and, and the community is powered by the microgrid.
Yep.
That's right. But I really have to say, Gull Bay First Nations made it easy for us. Sometimes these projects can be challenging and adversarial, but it was really very collaborative from all of the stakeholders involved. So we really appreciate that.
In looking at the discussion points and some of the things that we've already covered, is there anything that you think you want to get out there that perhaps we've missed and should highlight, should draw attention to?
ABB did a great job. They really did. There's two guys up there and they sat at the computers for weeks on end to get it programmed properly and make it work. And I was impressed with them. They were really good and the guys knew exactly what they were doing. I was dumbfounded with what they were doing, but it's just, it was well above my capabilities, but it was good to see that these guys were so strong at what they did, It was good to see it.
See, I'm actually kind of glad you said that and you have that little story, Tony, because ABB is one of the sponsors of EBPowerCon. So that's
well, there you have it.
Perfect.
I didn't know that.
One other, Anthony, that I do have to mention specifically is Stantec Engineering. They were our electrical and civil design partner, and they do have a great bench depth of expertise on the renewable side. So they were a big help in overcoming some of these technical challenges as well on the front end.
No, that's good to hear. It's good to hear that you were able to find expertise that enabled you to successfully carry out this project. And just based on what I'm hearing from you, Kevin, and from you, Tony, there was good communication and collaboration. And I think it was you, Tony, who said, or perhaps it was you, Kevin, it wasn't adversarial. It's kind of everybody was on the same page trying to get this built for the benefit of the community. So congratulations to both of you, to the Alltrade and your partners teams for executing this first in Canada remote microgrid project. Thank you so much for joining me, gentlemen, both of you, to talk about it.
Thanks a lot,
You're welcome.
Anthony. We appreciate it. Have a great day. Thank you.